Good morning. Good morning, one and all. I'm Catherine Bush at Calvary Episcopal Church in the Great Hall, welcoming those of you who are here in person and those of you who are joining us online. It's good to gather today for some good storytelling and a little bit of history making as we put some past pieces together with this present moment in Memphis. We're delighted today to welcome Dana Wilson and Corinne Mcclure. Dana is the Bridges president and CEO, and Corinne is the director of recruitment there. And they're here to tell us, again, this longer history of Bridges than some of us may know. Bridges is celebrating their 100th year in service to Memphis, and that story has some Calvary roots and some Calvary seeds in the deeper history. And also to tell us about what's going on at Bridges now, today, and how we might, through Bridges, connect with our city and connect with one another, which seems like a very appropriate conversation to be having this morning. So I'm really glad to welcome both of them here, and all of you. We'll let them tell some stories, and then if there's an opportunity, we may do some crowd conversation as well. So it's good to be together. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Catherine, and thank you for having us here from Bridges to be in community with you all this morning. I just want to express how humble I am to be here first. Partially because I am not a historian, and I am also a first-generation Memphian, and I'm a Jew. So for all of these reasons, for me to be here today to talk about the 100-year history of Bridges and its roots, its deep roots in this congregation and the Episcopal Church is ironic, to say the least. So I'm not going to pretend that I'm a historical expert. My background is as a teacher and a storyteller, so hopefully this will at least be a little fun and entertaining, maybe a little educational. But what I'm going to focus on are sort of the through lines, the themes, because this story goes back 100 years, and what I knew about Bridges' 100-year history was about 2 lines on our website. And then in January, I had to start preparing for this 100th anniversary, and I have to say I had to, because when I became president and CEO in January of 2020, and then everything that happened in March of 2020 began, I've been a little distracted and a little focused on just keeping things going, right? But people would, every once in a while, someone would say, "What are you going to do for the 100th?" And I was like, "Stay here, keep doing what we do." So it was with a little bit of dread, right, that I undertook this question of how are we going to celebrate 100 years of Bridges. And so it started with me interviewing some folks around town, talking to some people who had particular history with Bridges and with the Episcopal Church, and doing some reading. And what emerged for me were really 2 things. One was, this is not Bridges' history. This is your history. This is our history. This 100 years belongs to you. It belongs to the Episcopal Diocese. It belongs to the Episcopal Church. It belongs to Calvary, St. Mary's Cathedral, and the dozens of Episcopal churches that have supported Bridges over its journey. So that's one thing. This is your celebration. And the other thing that really emerged for me is a deeper understanding of how Bridges is, how we became to be what we are, because there are these through lines. And so I've come to understand that this organization that I have served for 14 years, that I now stand as the leader of in this very challenging time, could not be what it is without this history. So that is also really important. I also just want to acknowledge the moment that we're living in and these days that we are in, and I just want to send comfort to the friends and family of Eliza Fletcher and Dwayne Tunstall and Rodolfo Berger, Richard Clark and Allison Parker. May they find peace knowing that all of our prayers are linked with theirs. And I also just want to challenge each of you as we think through and we walk through this history together to we're going to end on some call to action, right? Action and hope, right? Two really important things in this time. So as we go through this journey, what are the things? The question is, what do we do now? Where do we go from here, right? And so, yeah, with that, I'll sort of start 100 years ago. So what was going on 100 years ago in 1922? What was the scene? Well, I think about a few things. We had emerged from a period of epidemics, starting with 2 yellow fever epidemics in the 1870s, which decimated the city. And then there was a World War, and followed by the Spanish flu epidemic. Not so unlike where we have been. Also, in that time leading out of the near dissolution of our city of Memphis, we were in a time of social and political strife and confusion. It was a time when a statue of Nathan Bedford Forrest was erected. It was also a time where, there was a lot of confusion, concern, conflict, not unlike today. But there was also a time where a lot of interesting things were happening, like I imagine that some people were getting together and starting to hatch this idea of a Lenten preaching series, right? Because the 100th anniversary of that will come along next year. It's also a time in 1921 where at St. Mary's Episcopal Cathedral, the church had been built in the 1870s, but the two side parts of the nave were constructed out of wood, I believe because of a lack of funds at the time. And it was in 1921 that the church, St. Mary's Cathedral, raised funds from across the Memphis community, from different communities of faith, from different houses of worship, to complete this cathedral. And everyone showed up and supported that. Why? Because of what St. Mary's Cathedral had been to Memphis over the previous decades. So it sort of solidified St. Mary's identity as the church for everyone, the place for everyone to come to, that it was Memphis, it was a Memphis church. And I would say the Lenten preaching series has also the idea of bringing this church and making it a place for everyone to come to center themselves in a deeply spiritual time for everyone, a time of renewal and a time of rebirth. So I think about who were the people hatching those ideas, right? So that was happening. Well, there was also this other thing happening, and that was that several women from St. Mary's Episcopal Cathedral and Calvary Church created something called the Church Mission of Help. So have you heard of the Church Mission of Help, anyone? No, right? Okay. So this is the roots. This is what led to Bridges. So this actually started out of Trinity Church of Wall Street. So it was a model that started in New York City, and they basically seeded these ministries around the country. And Calvary and St. Mary's is where this church ministry started here in Memphis. And there were also ministries in Nashville, Knoxville, and Chattanooga, but none of those lasted more than a few years. The Church Mission of Help of Memphis continued. It had a constant through line, so it's very unique. And there was a council in New York City, and so this model was really came out of that. And so in that sense, it was actually very innovative. The original leader of the Church Mission of Help was a woman named Teresa de Birmingham, and she was a trained social worker. And so she was the first executive secretary, the first leader of this history. And this is her signature behind me, and she was she was a trained social worker, and so she built this mission on the idea that as a trained social worker, that the church's mission in the community was to go door to door to find women who were often unmarried or widowed. Think of the times where we were living in, and help connect them to pre- and postnatal services, housing, healthcare, job opportunities, and literally women from this community were going door to door, talking to other women who were not a part of their church, who were not a part of their neighborhood, who were not a part of their story, their church family, and helping them. And so the next leader was a woman named Agnes Grabeau, and she was also a trained social worker. She actually led the mission from 1925 all the way to 61. And so what that did was really, what it built out was the first mission, the first work in community that was actually led by professional social workers in Memphis, as far as we know. So think about what the profession of social work has become. What does it mean to go out into communities and help people? Well, this started here because of you, because of your history, right? The other thing is, where was this happening? So the first neighborhood, the first suburb of Memphis, if many of you may or may not know, was Greenlaw, which is now considered Uptown. It's just north of here, right? It's also where the Bridges Center is now located. And we were just talking about how when we, during the Lenten season, some of our staff will actually walk here to the church to attend the Lenten series and get some waffles. So it's within walking distance, right? And so people would come here and would come from here, from this neighborhood, and head to Greenlaw. And Greenlaw was also a really particularly interesting neighborhood because it was an immigrant neighborhood. People lived there from all different walks of life, and there were lots of languages spoken, people of different races, different backgrounds. And so I think of that as significant also because we're talking about people who had a common historic roots in the Episcopal Church, which in Memphis means that you have a connection to North Carolina probably, and then a connection further back to England. But we're talking about serving people from literally all over the world who had come to Memphis to find a better life. And so it is a place where the people come out of their comfort zone and start working with people who are different than them. And what did that look like? So Reverend Jim Boyd, who was the executive director of Bridges from 1996 to 2011, told me personally that he had a conversation with Nancy Fulmer, who was of blessed memory, who was a member of Calvary for many, many years. And she remembers as a little girl accompanying her mother going door to door in Greenlaw and talking to women. So this leaders and social workers, trained laywomen, members of this church to literally go door to door. And that reminds me of things that the work that we've done over these past several years. I know many of you heard Brian Stevenson speak at a Facing History and Ourselves dinner that sort of transformed our city in some ways, and he talked about being proximate to the problems, being proximate to the issues of the community that we live in. And I think that it is nice to know that people from this congregation chose to be proximate to their neighbors who had very different stories than themselves, very different background, very different access, and to work closely with those people. So he brought that challenge to us, but we know in our bones, we know in our history that that is a part of who we are. So the story continues, right? So it started with these two women from these two churches. I got to point out, it was the ladies that did it, right? And there was an organization led by ladies, and these women were committed to the profession of social work. But it really was supported by multiple churches, and I need to give credit where credit is due. So it was Calvary Church, Grace Church, Holy Trinity Church, St. Mary's Cathedral, St. Luke's Church, and St. John's Church, which through the 1930s and 60s really sustained the church mission of help. So this is not a small endeavor. The offices were in the crypt of St. Mary's Cathedral, which there are actually some pretty funny stories about the meetings in the crypt. But that work was sustained out of the cathedral, and many other Episcopal churches joined in and supported the work. What did it look like? So it looked like women going door to door, being trained as lay people doing social work, and then social workers actually building out systems. So they built programs, they held conferences, largely focused on these basic social services. And that sounds kind of, I don't know, like to me when I first thought about that, I was like, really, that's it? But at the time, there was none of that. There weren't nonprofits doing that work in Memphis. It was brought here by this mission. And so it's kind of the first example also of wraparound services, because they had programs for youth, programs for mothers, connecting people to services, and that was a first for Memphis. I don't know if you're catching it, but there's like a theme of firsts in this, lots of firsts. So then I want to move into the 60s when the executive secretary, she finally retires after a long and beautiful career. And the Church Mission of Help's like, what are we going to do? We got to build this up. Something's happening here, and we are now in the early 60s. So another time of great questioning, of conflict, and I'd say like a reckoning, right, of who we're going to be as a city, and how are we going to find justice? How are we going to continually do good work in the city? And so after a long search, the board recruits Reverend Don Mowry from Nashville to come and lead what ends up becoming Youth Service of Memphis, right? So in the 1960s, Youth Service of Memphis becomes its own independent nonprofit. So it's no longer a part of just a mission under these two churches. It is now its own nonprofit and under Father Don's leadership. And the program also develops and changes. So it becomes really focused on supporting young people who are in the sort of most marginalized communities in Memphis. So they start focusing on Lauderdale Courts and Hurt Village, so people who are living in public housing. Hurt Village was located in Uptown, right? So in the area right where Bridges is today, also just right up the street. This is an image of Hurt Village. You may or may not realize that Hurt Village was actually the all-white housing, like public housing facility. And that's where Elvis Presley lived for a few years when he was young. So this is like a part of the history. And initially the work evolved to working with folks who were living in these public housing. But then there was under Father Don's leadership, there was a push to serve Black children in Memphis as well. And so he started to reach out to communities around Booker T. Washington and Manassas High School and start working with young people in those communities. And in order to do that well, what did he need to do? He needed to hire a more diverse staff, didn't he? So Bridges became the first racially integrated nonprofit staff in the history of Memphis. And they served students in different neighborhoods from different communities, and the folks who went and led those programs looked like the students from those neighborhoods, as it should have been, right? But it was actually through Father Don's leadership that another vision emerged, which was that young people could learn and work and grow together regardless of what they look like. And so he had a passion to bring young people to train together, Black and white, and he actually implemented racially integrated youth programming, and he was the first racially integrated youth program in Memphis. And in fact, just a like snapshot, imagine this in Memphis in the summer of 1968, right, after Dr. King had been assassinated in Memphis, and there was this question about what are we going to do this summer, and Father Don, very committed, said we're going to bring young people together this summer and we're going to train them. Those programs were scheduled to be held at Fuller Park. However, because there were safety and security concerns, they moved to the Naval Base in Millington so that they could be sure that the students would be safe. And I also want to think about that time, so that you have these students coming together from these different backgrounds, and the mission had really started with like poverty, marginalized young people who needed to have access to job skills, to basic services. And it's evolving into something more that's also about relationship and working together and learning to be together, right? And also at that time, there was a leader who came from the church named Gary Duvall, and he really had this passion for camping and adventure-based education, because he believed that like if you can play together, you can kind of do anything together as a fundamental sort of belief and tenet, and that is a part of Bridges' DNA, right? So like I just want to acknowledge that it goes all the way back to the early 60s and this question of how are we really going to bring together people from different walks of life. And so the idea of that camping program and that adventure program was like teaching communication skills and teamwork and helping people kind of sort of build their personal arsenal of how to show up, right? How to show up in community. And so that's a part of our history as well. So over the years, Father Don built up the program. He was speaking at Church of the Holy Communion one time, and there were some women that said, how can we help? How can we build this up? How can we expand this mission? And so soon after, the Guild of St. Augustine, are y'all familiar with that? That's a part of the history of the church, formed, and their initial work was just to serve youth services, just to help. So they organized events, fundraisers, clothing drives for youth. They waited tables at the Calvary waffle shop to benefit youth services. And there was this kind of ongoing growth. Throughout the 60s and 70s and 80s, youth service expanded. There was a moment where youth service was actually national in naval bases across the country. There was this workforce development, bringing young people together from public housing, from poverty, coming together and learning and building skills. That was funded through federal funding, and administrations change and things change, and so it changed again. So fast forward to 1988, when Rebecca Webb Wilson, who is part of the Kimmons Wilson Family Foundation, her kids were growing up. They were attending Briarcrest High School, and she felt that she wanted them to be the future of the community of Memphis, and she realized that their experience of Memphis was not preparing them for the future because they lived in a bubble and went to school with people that looked like them and worshiped like them, and she knew Memphis was bigger than that. She'd been a U.S. attorney. She'd done a lot of work across the community. She was a philanthropist already, so she went to Father Don and sort of expressed this concern she had for her kids, and with the knowledge of everything that I just shared with you, right? Like understanding this long history. And so she and Father Don kind of hatched this idea of bridge builders, which is really, I think, the beginning of what we mostly know about bridges today, right? This idea that we could bring youth together from different backgrounds to work together, to play together, and to build a better Memphis together. And so that work began in 1988 and grew slowly until Father Don retired, and Jim Boyd, who many of you probably know. I certainly have heard him preach at the Lenten series, and I had the privilege of working with for several years when I started at Bridges. Came and took the helm and really focused on building bridge builders into a more building bridges an entrepreneurial organization that served people in really creative ways, and growing the Bridge Builders program. And so there was leadership from lots of people who are a part of this community here today. A lot of participation too. There are actually a lot of Bridge Builder alumni who are in leadership of Memphis today, but I think of Robbie McQuiston, who is an early director of the program, Bill Snodgrass, and many others. And then in 2004, Bridges led a $10 million capital campaign to build what is the Bridges Center. And here we are at the Bridges Center here today. Like I said, we're just down the street, a short walk to Uptown, and we have made it all these years. So I think with that, I'm gonna pause because we want to talk about what it is that Bridges does today, and I think return to that challenge that I talked about at the beginning, which is what is the role of the Episcopal Church? What is your role in the work of Bridges today? Because now you know our history, our organization belongs to you in so many ways, and there's this through line, right, of reaching out to community, of including others in service to young people. There are lots of through lines. And so I'm going to stop for a minute, and we're going to I want to bring the students of Bridge Builders into the room, because the youth, the teachers, the parents, the alumni speak volumes about where we have come and where we are today. So I'm going to bring them into the space to share their story, and then Corinne and I are going to talk a little bit about what Bridges is today. So here we go.
Being a youth today, it's difficult to step out. It's difficult to be different. It's difficult not to be with the crowd. A lot of the students feel like, well, if I have a voice, if I actually explain how I'm feeling, then I'm going to be different from the majority. As a counselor, I was in a middle school by myself. I have 354 kids, and I needed something to help them build those soft skills, like something to help them kind of see the world beyond just our middle school.
Bridge Builders gives the kids those tools. It's a program that looks to bridge the gap, regardless of where you come from, what you look like, your background.
Bridge Builders challenges me to dig deeper, to ask hard questions even if it's uncomfortable. And more importantly, it challenges me to take a step back and to listen to the answers to that question.
I look back on when I was a little 7th grader.
Yeah, I'm always nervous when I have to meet new people because I don't know if they're gonna like me or not, or what's gonna happen.
I grew up in a bubble, went to a small little private school. I didn't know anything. Literally, I'm looking back on it, I knew nothing. And I feel like this program enlightened me to so many of the important issues that there are in the world.
And then they relate that to our community. And the program teaches teenagers how to be the change and how to make their community and their world better.
That's something that people don't really talk about. They like to talk about the fun stuff, but that's definitely there too. And it is a lot of fun, and you are gonna love it. But there's also a lot of deeper moments and deeper understandings and ways to connect with people that you've never met before and probably would have never otherwise met.
Kids want to leave a mark. That's what I've noticed. They want to have footprints. So any opportunity that you can offer them to have a footprint, they're like, okay, I can get my name in the history books by doing this.
So coming in, I was expecting to learn how to be a better person as far as socializing with people who are different cultures, different race, ethnicities. And I feel like I'm a really introverted person, still slightly am. So I feel like I benefited from this program by being able to open up more, being outspoken, coming out of my shell, stepping out my comfort zone, and just getting comfortable with being uncomfortable.
I was seeing my timid children that I teach every day come out of these shells, and they would come back at the summer conference and they would incorporate all of these ideas around our school.
Those same students, I've seen them do different things in high school. They participate in things with the Civil Rights Museum, and it makes me feel proud that it started out with a student who was afraid to speak in public, not really a public speaker, or just a student who wanted to be in front of people, that are now in a leadership role.
Them being able to communicate well with others, work on a team, that's going to be very, very, very important for them in the coming years.
But probably my favorite thing is that it makes kids think. Any opportunity that they have to think is good.
It has permeated into everything that I do. Bridge Builders is something that you can't just experience and forget. It becomes a part of who you are.
Good morning. My name is Corinne Mcclure. I am a proud Bridge Builder alumni. And as you saw, that was a clip from 2019 in our most recent, pre-COVID, that was our last in-person summer conference. And then we had to move virtual for 2 very long years, but then we survived and we were back this summer. So it was really neat for me as an alumni of the program and as someone that has worked in different capacities with Bridge Builders to see the middle school students that were in that video just finish their junior and senior conferences with us. And many of those juniors and seniors that you saw on the screen came back and facilitated those juniors and seniors. So it's very cyclical and it stays with you, like I said. So in 2012, it was about April, thereabouts, getting on the deadline to apply for bridge builders, my mom said, "You're gonna do bridge builders." I was like, I don't need bridge builders. I grew up at Idlewild Presbyterian Church. I went to Grace St. Luke's and to White Station High School. I had it all figured out. I didn't need to go to a leadership conference. I knew what I was doing. She said, "You're gonna do bridge builders." So showed up for my conference week thinking, I'm gonna be the rock star. I know everything. I don't need to be here. Wow, was I wrong? It completely shifted the way that I approach leadership, diversity, and community action in this city, and it's an experience that has stayed with me, clearly, because I'm still involved. So after that first conference, I was lucky enough to be accepted as one of the first cohorts of our Bridge Builders Change Fellowship that Dana was overseeing in the time. So Dana and I got to start doing the work. We went to the Highlander Research and Education Center in East Tennessee for a weekend of social change training and all of the things that I thought I knew and very clearly did not. So it was really special to continue. So you start off with the summer conference, and then I got to continue that work with a cohort of 15 people, many of whom are still in my life as dear friends today. So fast forward to 2014, I graduated from high school and said, okay, I'm gonna come back, I'm gonna do the summer, I'm gonna work for Bridge Builders. And after the first summer, I went back to college and said, okay, I'll do another one. And then my parents said, you're thinking about doing a third summer at Bridge Builders? I said, might as well. And so eventually I spent 3 of my 4 summers in college working for Bridge Builders as a facilitator, where I got to see the full circle happen again. And so I was watching young people. I had the privilege of facilitating young people and being a guide kind of as they had that same experience that I had so many years prior. And then I finished college, and naturally, I came back to Bridge Builders as a full-time AmeriCorps member and spent a year facilitating in our Connect level of programming, which is a level of programming that serves anywhere between 3,000 to 5,000 youth pre-pandemic. We're building back up to that in their schools and in community workshops. So if any of you have youth who are not actively in the Bridge Builders program but have been to Bridges, that's likely the avenue that they took, coming to do a Connect workshop, and that's kind of the introduction. So I had seen all 3 levels of programming. We have Connect, we have Collaborate, which is the program that was featured in the video. That's kind of our, that's what Rebecca Webb Wilson started in the 1980s and 90s. And so then we have Change, which is a group of students who are still doing, Change is still existing. They have many more students now doing this social change work. They are youth fellows, and they are paid by Bridges, so they are compensated for doing the work. It's not just an after-school activity, it's a job, and they treat it as such. So I thought, yeah, I've done my service with Bridges. I'm gonna go to grad school. It's gonna be great, and Bridges is gonna keep thriving. And so I moved to Little Rock, Arkansas, and was in school, and then March of 2020 happened. And I was living alone in an apartment in Little Rock, and so I decided just to come back home for a bit, finish school pretty much entirely online. And it hit May, and I was like, okay, I'm done with school, it's time to get a job at Bridge Builders. So thinking about how Dana spoke to the through lines, whether it's the 100-year history or an individual's history with the program, it stays with you. And it's an organization we tell students that you're gonna get out of your experience what you put into it. And how thankful am I that I put into it? It has been the most life-changing experience. And to now be in a role where I work with schools and community organizations to teach young people, or not to teach young people even, to introduce young people to the work that we're doing, is the most full circle and rewarding job a person could have, because this organization is the reason I am who I am and where I am. And so now getting to watch other young people have that experience, and just to be not leaders for the future, but leaders for right now. Young people are just as much a part of this community as any of us, if not more so, because they're going to be here for longer and they're doing the work. And I just feel really honored and blessed to be a part of it. So that's my experience with Bridge Builders. But I think we might talk a little bit now about what we're doing to help continue moving the work forward.
Yeah, so we'll stay up here. Thank you. Yeah, thanks. Right? Corinne and I obviously go way back. So usually when you get a talk about an organization, they start by telling you the mission. Well, I told you, actually, you are the mission, that this mission, we arrived here together. So this Bridges is about uniting and inspiring diverse young people to be confident and courageous leaders who are committed to community transformation. It speaks to your history and our history. It is about bringing diverse young people together, about helping them grow to reach their deepest and fullest potential. So leadership for us, you heard it from the students, it means a lot of things. It's a very personal journey. But it's not just to be a leader for yourself. You have to be, at Bridges, you are a leader for transformation of Memphis. And we chose that word very carefully. We actually chose it with students, and they liked the word because they said it reminds us that it's a long journey. Transformation of an individual may happen in a moment, in a summer conference, in a week you may feel transformed, but transformation of Memphis, of the Memphis community, is a legacy. It is a journey of decades. It's a journey of a century, and here we are. So thank you so much. We want to end, well, before we go to questions, we want to let you know about some things we have coming up with this 100th anniversary and some ways in which we hope that you will stay connected to the legacy that is our shared history. So one thing you can easily do is join us for our Centennial Celebration event. We are having a sunset concert at Bridges. It is on Thursday, September 29th. We'll start at 5 p.m. We are going to have food trucks. It's going to be open to the public. It features Jared Boyd, who is the program director and a DJ at WYXR, which is the really cool new radio station in town. Jared is a Bridge Builder alum who also served as a summer conference facilitator. In fact, his DJing started at Bridge Builders.
He was my facilitator. So it's really full circle.
Yes, and so he's going to be our MC that night. But we are also going to feature the moving, fun, shake your body music of Hope Claiborne's Soul Scrimmage. So that is a sort of funk, reggae, soul music. She is a neonatal nurse at the Med by day and a rock star by night. So we are going to be celebrating with Hope and her team, and we're also going to be joined by the Stax Music Academy, because the students from Stax actually collaborated with the Bridge Builders over the past year and a half and rewrote a new Bridge Builder song, updated a song about being a bridge builder. We're going to perform that live. It's going to be so much fun. And we are inviting the community in, the neighborhood in, and we are inviting you as our historic friends, our friends of this in this celebration, and we will have that music, and actually at sundown, Bishop Phoebe will be joining us, and we'll do a moment of invocation, maybe some proclamations, some big celebrations, and just be together. And I know that, at this time it's probably challenging to think about like coming downtown and being outside, especially after the week we've had. But that is an act of courage, right? Showing up in community, it is our collective being together, showing up together, that is what moves us forward. So now more than ever, we would love for you to join us that evening. Also, I want to encourage each of you to connect with Bridges in any way that makes sense for you. Obviously, it costs money to do what we do. We welcome donations. We welcome investments in Bridges. We appreciate that. It is folks from the Episcopal community that have sustained Bridges for the 100 years we have been here, and we are grateful for that. And last but not least, this is your role. We got to bring the students back to Bridges. We had programming going on throughout the pandemic. It was virtual, and the students continued to participate. Most of the students who stayed with Bridges throughout the pandemic, through the virtual programming, were students who had a long relationship with Bridges, who had started when they were, kind of like Corinne, started when they were much younger and stayed with us. But our recruitment efforts, every year we bring in about 50% of the students that participate in Bridges every year are new to the organization, right? So 50% of the students stay year after year after year, but some of those students, they find their leadership and then they're like, I'm going to go lead my church youth group. I'm going to go lead the student council at my school. And they find these other leadership opportunities, and that creates space for new students, right? Because we need more space. We can't always accommodate the demand. So we would love, we are looking to reach more students. So if you have connections to young people, if you have grandchildren, children, great nieces and nephews, encourage them to be a part of Bridge Builders as a part of their being, a person, a spiritual, committed person of faith and community in Memphis. Challenge them to be a part of Bridge Builders. You heard it right here. It is life-changing. And also invite us in. Any spaces that you work with young people, whether it's here in the church, at schools, please invite us in. Corinne does a great job, and we will show up anywhere. So those are the 3 ways in which I would love for you to engage with Bridges, and we hope that we can see you on the 29th. But now that's the end of our presentation, and we're here for questions or comments or anything you would like to say.
I just want to express some gratitude for hearing a story of light and purpose and meaning. So thank you for the long work, but thank you for being here today to tell a story that is celebratory about our young people and the Memphis community. So thank you for that. Are there questions or stories or connections that people want to make, or comments that you have to share?
Who are rising 7th through 12th, We work with students who are rising 7th through 12th grade students, and then we also have AmeriCorps summer positions for students who have just graduated from high school, and for those who are a year removed from high school. You don't have to be a college student, but they are typically college-aged folks as well. So our actual participants are 7th through 12th graders.
Great. I know there's some Bridges folks in here and some folks with connections and family and participants, but are there other questions or things that you're wondering about? Yeah, Kate.
Are there opportunities for volunteering for people like us?
That's a great question. So the question was, are there opportunities for volunteering? So generally, they're somewhat few and far between in terms of just regular volunteer opportunities. Most of the work we do is directly with students and supporting and training students, and there's a lot of required training to do that. And so most of the folks who serve at Bridges, the majority of the service that's done at Bridges is actually done through the AmeriCorps service program. So those are young people who are basically providing national service, but at a home at Bridges. And so that's what Corinne did as both as a college student in the summers and then as a full-time member. So the majority of our service at Bridges is occurring that way. We occasionally will have opportunities for volunteerism, but we don't have a lot of programs where we just bring in volunteers. So.
Drawing your current students from? What high schools and neighborhoods are you drawing your current people from?
Absolutely. So we work in over 150 schools and community organizations. So we have students represented across the board from private, public, charter, homeschooled students, from middle and high school aged folks. So there's not really a specific school that we are focused on. It's really more we're identifying schools where we don't have bridge builders and trying to figure out how we can call those students in as well. Some of our largest student populations, as you can imagine, from larger schools are White Station and Houston High School and the University Middle. We have a really awesome, strong student population there. Lausanne Collegiate School. So those are just a few where I can think off the top of my head that we have. Oh, Central, Whitehaven, St. Mary's. So we've got lots of students in lots of areas, but we are actively working to increase the numbers in schools where we notice the student turnout is not as high, so that we make sure that our program is as representative of our community as possible.
Yeah, so I think we're in the pandemic, things have been shifting, but in a general average year, pre-pandemic, 57 zip codes. So it's not just Shelby County, it's beyond the county, eastern Arkansas, northwest Mississippi. We have students coming from all of these backgrounds, and we find that to be really enriching because you have students from small towns and rural communities and students who grew up in the inner city, students from all different religious backgrounds and different experiences, and that's kind of what makes the magic happen. But I also want to just shout out Corinne and the team that she's a part of, which is our recruitment team. So that to get there, to do that is a huge lift. So actually that's where a lot of our volunteers reside. They are teachers, they are school counselors or chaplains at places like St. Mary's, previously our friend here, who are our connectors in the schools. And then our recruitment team go and work with those connectors to build out a strategy within that school community or that faith-based community to figure out what's the best way to pull students in. And we really train people because we don't want just the usual suspects to come to Bridges, just the pre-identified leaders. There's also what I like to refer to them as the sleepers. They're the leaders that they don't know they're leaders and nobody knows they're leaders, but when they get to Bridges, they kind of figure it out and they become leaders, So we love that. And so Corinne and the others, they do a really good job of communicating to folks throughout the community what this opportunity really means and helping identify the students that need to be a part of it. And they apply, and their applications are reviewed and scored blindly. And then when we pull the final selection together, we really are building a diverse cohort of students to participate in the program throughout the year. And students can also apply online. So we have students that if their school if we can't find a way to get into that school, and sometimes that happens, just because the school's under-resourced and there's just no one there that has the bandwidth to help us, right, get in. We have social media, we put the word out, we try to reach everyone in every way we can, and they can apply online. So there's no barrier to entry is kind of the angle that we're using. That's how we get all those numbers.
How many students at any one time are participating?
So before the pandemic, we were serving in the collaborate level. We were serving roughly 1,200 to 1,300 students. We have enrolled in the program right now 658. So students who really stuck with us, but that pandemic was exhausting and folks were tired of being on Zoom. So we understand that we're rebuilding, and that's why we are trying to be very intentional about hitting the ground running and getting those numbers back up. And it's going to happen because students were with us all summer in person. They're going to tell their friends, and we're engaging with folks like you who know young people, and we're going to get back up there. But right now we have 658. We have had 1,200 or more.
And across all of our program levels, we can serve about 5,000 a year. So the connect level, the collaborate level, and the change level, across all of those, we can work with about 5,000 a year. It's been lower during the pandemic because students weren't allowed to do field trips, which is basically how we would do a lot of those connect workshops, or we weren't allowed to go into schools because there were lots of limitations on people coming from the inside out. So super disruptive, as you can imagine. But shout out to Corinne. She also was a coordinator for our summer conferences this summer, which were small but mighty. I actually asked our evaluation manager who, assesses our programs during the summer. I said, how did we do? It's been a couple of years, everybody's a little rusty. And she was like, Dana, this data is gonna be really hard to interpret because every score is already as high as it could possibly be. I don't know how I'm gonna make recommendations when everything is considered to be awesome. So I just wanna shout out that the staff have been able to come back strong, provide an amazing experience. And I do think that word of mouth is the most important advertisement for the type of work that we do. It's kind of hard to explain what you saw in that video. And the students who had this summer experience, I'm sure, are going to help us rebuild, and that's our goal, and that's actually kind of why we're doing Sunset, why we're really telling why this Centennial is not a banquet and just a fundraiser, why it's a campaign to tell our story, to share our history, and to bring people together. That's the approach. So it's all connected.
Well, we want to thank you all both for coming to do that work and to tell us the story, and for reminding us of stories and threads that we might have never heard or had forgotten, and for being proximate, for getting close. It's good to be close to y'all. It's good to be close to this story and to this history again, and so we give thanks for your work and appreciate you being here. Thanks. Thanks, y'all.